Have you ever wondered how the world began? Not just in a scientific sense, but in the echoing voice of a story. Among the Yoruba people of West Africa, creation is not a sterile explosion or an empty void. It's a descent, a shaping, a divine act marked by mistakes, forgiveness, and wonder. This week in the Lorekeepers library, we're unfolding the world, quite literally, with a tale that begins above the clouds. A story passed down through centuries by families gathered by firelight. This is not just a creation myth, it is a cornerstone of Yoruba identity, a culture with a folklore as rich and as vast as the Niger River itself. From tales of Ajapa, the cunning tortoise whose wit always gets into trouble, to Sango, the thunder-wielding king turned god, and Emoja, the great mother of the waters, Yoruba's stories span the heavens and the earth. But today, we're beginning where all the stories begin, with the shaping of the world. But how does the world suspended in nothingness become land, tree and sky? To answer that, we need to follow one Orisha who carried the weight of creation until one misstep changed everything. Hello wanderers, scholars and story seekers, welcome back to the Lorekeepers library. I'm Chris, your host and curator of Curious Tales. If you're new here, this podcast is your gateway into folklore and myths that have shaped human culture for millennia. Each episode we offer a different door into the vast gallery of global storytelling, from whispered legends to thunderous epics. If you enjoy today's journey, remember to follow, like and most importantly share the story. These tales live where they are told and every listener keeps the tradition alive. And this episode comes thanks to a request from a listener, Olodumare, who wanted to dive into the roots of Yoruba mythology. So thank you for reminding us that to share a story is to keep a culture alive. And so, let us begin. In the beginning, there was no earth, no mountains, no rivers, no people, only two great realms, Oran, the sky above, and Ile, the formless waters below. It was a world suspended in silence, where the divine Orisha dwelled in the celestial expanse, and the world we know has yet to take form. Presiding above all was Olodumare, the supreme being. Not Orisha, but something far greater, a cosmic force, the source of all life and all power. It was Olodumare who held Asir, the sacred authority that fuels creation and transformation. Yet, for all that power, Olodumare rarely interfered directly. Instead, the work of shaping and guiding the universe fell to the Orisha, divine spirits, each with their own roles and realms. Among them was Obatala, wise, calm and eternally robed in white. He was the Orisha of clarity, peace and creation, and he watched the empty world below with a sculptor's longing. Where others saw nothing, Obatala saw possibility. A place where life could take root, a land shaped not by chaos, but by purpose. And so, he approached Olodumare with a request to go down and create the earth. Olodumare agreed and entrusted Obatala with the sacred tools to carry out the task. First, a gold chain long enough to reach from the heavens down into the waters below. It shimmered like sunlight caught in motion, each link cool and weighty in the hands, but pulsed softly with divine energy. As Obatala held it, he could feel its subtle hum, like a breath of aura itself vibrating through the metal. Then, a calabash filled with fertile soil, warm to the touch and fragrant with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Its smooth sides were etched with swirling patterns that seemed to move when it held the light. Inside, the red soil shifted gently, soft, grainy, whispering like sand through fingers. There was also a white hen, alert and fidgeting, feathers brushed with ash and ivory. Her beady eyes scanned her surroundings with a knowing calm, as if already aware of her vital role of what to come. She clucked softly, the sound crisp in the stillness of the sky. A black cat was sent with him too. Not for power, but for companionship. It purred like a lullaby, curled silently at his feet, its golden eyes reflecting the stars. a quiet reminder that even gods may need company on long journeys into the unknown. And lastly, a single palm nut, small, unassuming, yet holding within it the potential for civilization. Its smooth shell felt unbreakable, but inside it carried the beings of trees, homes, food and culture, everything that one way would define human life. Obatala accepted these gifts and prepared for his descent. He would be the first to cross the threshold from the celestial into the earthly, the first to leave the perfect stillness of the heavens and lay the groundwork for the imperfect living world. And though his face remained calm, there was a weight behind his eyes, part anticipation, part awe. The task before him was monumental. It wasn't about creating land, it was about creating meaning, breathing spirit into emptiness. But before he made his descent, just before he took hold of the golden chain, something happened. Something small, something deeply human, and it would change the course of the world's creation. The journey from divine intent to divine action doesn't always go as planned, and it's here that a single decision, one seemingly harmless indulgence, alters the fate of the world. Obatala stood at the edge of heaven, the golden chain before him gleaming in the celestial light. The calabash of soil rested beside him, warm and fragrant, its weight a promise. The restless hen ruffled her feathers in anticipation. The quiet cat blinked slowly, curled like a shadow beneath his foot. And the precious palm nut sat cradled in his palm, so small, yet bursting with unspoken potential. It was a moment of unimaginable anticipation, the threshold between thought and creation. But before beginning the journey, Obatala paused. He was, after all, still an Orisha, not all-knowing and not without temptation. The task ahead was immense, perhaps even overwhelming. To descend into nothingness and shape a world from dust. How does one go preparing for such a thing? So he reached for something familiar, something that offered ease and comfort. Palm wine. It was sweet on the tongue, thick with honeyed warmth. The scent was rich and earthy and inviting, like fermenting fruit on a summer day. It dulled the edges of his anxiety, softened the awe of the task ahead. One sip became two, and then more. And soon the divine clarity he was known for, so steady and unwavering, began to blur. The world tilted. The tools, the mission, even the purpose itself, they drifted from focus like mist in the moonlight. Obatala succumbed to sleep, his head resting near the untouched chain. The calabash remained sealed, the hen still, the earth unformed, a world poised on the edge of being, held back not by malice, but by misjudgment. And it's here the beauty in Yoruba myth. Obatala's failure is not punished with thunder or exile, not a bolt from the heavens, no divine fury. Instead, it is acknowledged with a quiet truth. Even the wise falter, even peace can stumble. And still, the story moves forward. Because while Obatala slept, someone else was watching. Oduduwa, his younger brother, sharp-eyed, purposeful, saw the abandoned tools. He saw the world still waiting, trembling with the potential. And he acted. Oduduwa took up the golden chain, its link still thrumming with divine light, and descended from Ura into the watery void of Ilé. The descent was long and silent, like falling through a dream. When he reached the bottom, where sea met absence, he opened the calabash. The red soil spilled out with a soft hiss, falling onto the waters. It did not sink, it spread. He released the hen, who stretched her wings and began to scratch and scatter the soil. With every peck and claw, the earth took shape. Ridges rose, hollows deepened, contours formed. It wasn't a smooth or perfect land. It was textured and alive. It pulsed with possibility. Hills and valleys emerged, places where rivers could run and forests could take root. From sacred chaos, land was born. Then, gently, Oduduwa planted the palm nut into the newborn soil. Almost instantaneously it sprouted, its roots clutching the ground, its trunk rising tall and unshaken. It became a tree like no other. Around its base the land expanded, anchoring itself around the first seed. That place became Ilé-Ifẹ, the spiritual cradle of the Yoruba people. A city born from divine hands where myth and memory still breathe through stone and soil. And when Obatala awoke, the world had changed. The chain was coiled, the calabash was empty, the land below him shimmered in dawn's glow, real and alive, already becoming, and it had not been his hand that shaped it. What must he have felt in that moment? Shame, surely, a heavy swallowing guilt, regret of what could have been, bitterness perhaps, his dream realized but not by him, and maybe something deeper still, the fragile ache of purpose lost. But what Obatala did next is what lifts the tale beyond myth, because it is not failure that defines us, it's how we choose to rise from it. When Obatala awoke, the taste of palm wine still on his tongue, the golden chain was empty, the calabash of soil was gone, and the hen and the cat vanished. At first confusion, and then the dawning realization, he had failed. The world had been formed without him, and there, in the silence of Uran, came something deeper, shame. Divine though as he was, Obatala felt the weight of his failure as keenly as any mortal might. His great task, his moment of creation, had slipped away because of a moment of weakness. But this is where the story takes a turn. It would have been easy for Obatala to let bitterness take root, to let pride or jealousy grow like thorns around his heart. Instead, he did something profoundly human and profoundly divine. He owned his mistake. Humbled, Obatala returned to Olodumare and confessed what had happened. He asked for forgiveness, not only for failing in his duty, but for allowing palm wine to cloud his mind. And in that moment, a new path opened for him. Olodumare did not cast him out. He did not strip Obatala of his divine nature. Instead, he granted him a new role, one equally important in shaping the world. If Oduduwa had created the land, then Obatala was to shape that lived upon it. He would become the sculptor of humanity. Given sacred clay and divine breath, Obatala descended Ilé-Ifẹ. There, beneath the great palm tree, he began to mold figures from the earth. Arms, legs, faces, torso, each one unique, each shaped with care. And when his work was complete, Olodumare breathed life into them, granting them spirit, will, and destiny. Thus, the first humans were born, not as perfect beings, but as reflection of both divine potential and imperfection. Now the Yoruba tell us that while crafting these early humans, Obatala's hands sometimes trembled. Perhaps the memory of the palm wine lingered, or perhaps it was simply the weight of the task. And from those trembling hands came people who were different, those with physical development disabilities. But rather than being cast aside, they were honoured. For Obatala, these children were his most special creation. He became their protector, their divine patron. Even today, in Yoruba belief, people with disabilities are not seen as a curse, but as especially close to Obatala, a living link between humanity and the divine. You can still feel this reverence in places where Obatala is worshipped. His shrines are sanctuaries of peace. White dominates the space, flowing fabrics, chalk markings, garments from head wrap to ankle. The colour of purity, of clarity, of sacred vow. Offerings of cool water are placed in smooth ceramic bowls, believed to soothe his spirit and those who seek his blessings. Silence is revered. Worshippers move gently, speaking softly, and often approach barefoot, their steps measured and respectful. In some regions, palm wine is strictly forbidden in his honour, a daily reminder of his vow of abstinence and the wisdom he gained from his failure. These are not just rituals, they are reflections of myth itself, a way of keeping the story alive, not in words, but in action, dress, and devotion. So what began as a story of failure became something much more, a story of forgiveness, responsibility, and new purpose, and of a god who did not let mistakes define him, but instead used it to redefine his role in the universe. From that moment, Obatala shaped the first humans from clay, and Oduduwa scattered the soil upon the waters. The world of the Yoruba began, not only in physical form, but in spirit, language, and memory. What was once myth became map. What began as divine intent took root in real soil. And nowhere in this legacy more alive than Ilé-Ifẹ. Nestled in the southern western heart of modern-day Nigeria, Ilé-Ifẹ is not merely a city, it is a spiritual cradle of the Yoruba people. Its name means the place of expansion, and is said to be the very spot where Oduduwa's sacred soil settled, where the white hen first sketched its land into shape, and where Obatala knelt to shape humankind. Today, Ilé-Ifẹ still pulses with sacred energy. Walking its streets, you'll find shrines nestled between market stalls, sculptures Orisha carved from ancient stones, and groves said to whisper with presence of spirits. The myth has never left. It's in the dust, in the echo of drums, in the rhythm of prayers offered before dawn. At the center of the city stands the Ono's palace, a place not just of political power, but spiritual continuity. The Ilé-Ifẹ is believed to be a direct descendant of Oduduwa, a living link between heaven and earth. His coronation rituals echo the creation myth. Soil is scattered, chains are handled, blessings are whispered in the name of those first acts of divine courage. Every year, festivals honor the Orisha who shaped the world. During the Oduduwa festival, one of the oldest and most sacred in Yoruba land, the king dons a ceremonial crown said to carry the power of Asi itself. Chants rise like smoke into the sky, and the city becomes a living altar draped in white and gold. And Obatala? His worship is stretched far beyond Ife. In Nigeria, his temples are quiet havens marked by simple white facades and tranquil atmosphere. Worshippers gathered in the early morning to offer water, white cloth, snail shells, and soft words, symbols of peace and humility. They ask not just for blessings, but for balance, for clarity in a noisy world. In Cuba, Obatala lives on in the Seriate traditions as a calm elder spirit known for fairness and wisdom. His followers dress in flowing white, carrying white beads, avoiding alcohol in reverence for his vow. They call him Obatala, a father to the sick and the misunderstood. In Brazil, he becomes Oxala, a regal figure in candomblé, honoured with processions and sacred dances. Worshippers move slowly, deliberately, dressed in immaculate white lace, their movements mirroring the grace and restraint of the Orisha himself. What unites all of these traditions, across oceans and continents, is not just the worship of a powerful god, it is the remembrance of a story that teaches that creation is not flawless, that mistakes are part of divine order, and that redemption lies not in denial, but in responsibility. Even the physical earth itself, Ile, the land, carries this legacy. In Yoruba thought, land is not just territory, it is ancestral sacred space and deeply personal. Every inch of soil recalls the myth. Every act of farming, building, or burying the dead is done with the awareness that the land was once divine soil, poured from a calabash onto the back of a cosmic ocean. The Yoruba creation story is not a relic. It is a living framework that one continues to shape ethics, art, family, governance, and identity. It is whispered in naming ceremonies, invoked in legal oaths, and woven into the proverbs that guide everyday decisions. Because for the Yoruba, myth is not fantasy. It is a truth told through story. It is a history in divine language. And it begins, always, with the land. Stories like the Yoruba creation myth are not confined by borders. They ripple outward, across time, cultures, and continents, echoing with familiar themes in unfamiliar tongues. At their heart, these myths ask the same questions. Who made us? Why are we flawed? And how do we find purpose in a world we didn't shape alone? The tale of Obatala's fall and redemption is uniquely Yoruba, deeply rooted in the soil of the Ilé-Ifẹ. but its soul can be felt far beyond West Africa. So let's follow this echo. In echoes around the world, this can be felt, such as in Norse myths, Odin and his brothers shaped the world from the body of a fallen giant, Ymir, crafting land, sky and sea from his bones and blood. But even the Allfather cannot avoid the tragic cycles of fate. Like Obatala, Odin gains wisdom not through conquest, but through sacrifice, hanging himself from the world tree to gain the runes. In the traditions of the Maori people, the world is born with Raganui, the Sky Father, and Papatuanuku, the Earth Mother, are separated by their children. Creation is an act of rupture, of sorrow and responsibility. Just as Obatala's creation follows a mistake, the Maori world begins with a necessary pain, giving birth to life in the space between. In Japanese Shinto mythology, the deities Izanagi and Izanami are given a jeweled spear to stir the oceans below the heavenly bridge. As droplets fall, they form the first islands of Japan. It mirrors Obatala's descent with divine tools and sacred earth, a pattern of the gods shaping the world with what they carry in hand and what they hold in heart. And in Christian tradition, Adam is shaped from the dust of the earth, echoing Obatala's clay-formed humans. But where Adam is cast out for disobedience, Obatala is embraced, his failure transformed into stewardship. It's the tender divergence where some myths condemn, Yoruba myth forgives and redeems. Across the globe we find this universal thread. Creation isn't perfect, it's personal. It comes with flaws, regrets and second chances, and it is in those imperfections that meaning takes root. And so, as we close the chapter on this creation story, we're reminded that every world, every culture carries its own versions of beginnings, some filled with light, others shadowed by misstep, but all infused with meaning. The Yoruba myth teaches us that creation is not about perfection, but perseverance, that even gods can falter, that forgiveness and responsibility are sacred acts in themselves. It invites us to see ourselves in the divine, not as flawless beings, but as creators of meaning, bearers of legacy, and keepers of stories. So as you move through your own days, remember the golden chain stretched between sky and sea, the soil crayed in the calabash, and the hands that shaped both land and life. Because every story shared is a thread woven into the vast tapestry of human wonder, and in sharing, we keep that world alive. And so from trembling hands and scattered soil the world began. The Yoruba creation story does not end in perfection, it ends in compassion. In a God who stumbled, stood up again and chose to shape life anyway. Who became the protector of the most overlooked. And maybe, in that, there's a message for us all. Because stories like this aren't just old, they're true. In a way that only myth can be. They show us what it means to be flawed, to be forgiven, and to find purpose in aftermath. And so, if this story moved you, share it. Not just with a like or a follow, though we appreciate those, but with a friend, a voice message, a fireside conversation. Stories live when we tell them, and cultures endure when we pass them on. And Toretto Berry, thank you again for this wonderful request. It is a reminder that even the quietest voice can spark the telling of ancient things. Until next time, I'm Chris, and this has been the Lorekeepers Library. And as always, keep exploring the world with wonder.